Hey guys, it's Luke. I just wanted to go over a question I got emailed to me last night, and I thought it was a great question from Jonathan, and it's pretty usable for a lot of folks right now as they are gearing up for their fall marathon. So, just a little bit of background. Jonathan has a goal pace of 6:52, which is right at 3 hours for the marathon. He just did his 8x600 speed workout. His goal pace was supposed to be between 6:02 and 6:18 based on our calculator. And then we also have a heat adjustment calculator, which takes in heat and humidity, which will give you then an adjusted pace. And then we also adjust that pace based on really what you're training for. So like we have it calculated to be more lenient on marathon pace stuff than it is than like say 5K, 10K stuff. You're not going to be as affected as much with the shorter stuff as you will the longer stuff. So in any case, his actual time was 6:02 to 6:18, which I would say be more on the 6:18 end anyway, because it's relative speed. It's not overall speed that we're working on in the marathon. So, but in any case, he adjusted with 6:20 to 6:48, and he ran 6:03, 6:16, 6:26, 6:30, 6:20, 6:12, 6:28, 6:15. And he admits that he probably went out too fast. And his quote is, "I felt like death," and we've all been there, haven't we? So mainly he was just, that really got him thinking to be, where should I be for these tempos coming up? And his marathon pace is 6:52. If he adjusts that, it's about 7:25 per mile. And then he is asking basically three things. One, if he adjusts, will he get the same benefits at the slower pace? And the answer is yes. You'll get the same benefits at the pace that's slower, because the effort is still going to be the same. Remember, we talk about how effort and pace, or excuse me, not even effort, but intensity and pace don't always match up. So in the summer, you may be running a slower pace than you were in the spring, but the effort or the intensity is the same. And that is where we want to be. So that's the case. So even though, so think of it this way: if he's running, 7-minute miles and he's at 70% of his VO2 max, but in the heat, that intensity makes that same pace 80% VO2 max. If he slows down to that 7:25, he's going to be more back to that 70% VO2 max, which is going to be where the marathon adaptations are going to occur. And it's not set in stone on that, but it's just the idea that the effort and the intensity is still going to be the same at that slower pace because of the heat and humidity. So the answer is yes to that. And then the second one, it wasn't really a question, but he's worried that the slower pace won't allow him to feel the marathon pace, which is true. That's a great thing to be worried about. However, this is where we can't be so caught up in GPS technology and things like that. This is where you have to listen to your body. Yes, you can set up your watch to that slower pace, and you on your end of the feedback system, you have to recognize how that feels. How does that effort feel? How does that intensity feel? And if you can get into that mindset, then the pace is just another variable involved, but it's not necessarily going to dictate how you feel. So that, again, we go back to that slower pace still being the same effort is what your marathon pace would feel like, hopefully in October. And so then you still learn how that effort level feels, even though the paces might not match up. So you have to be paying attention to it. You can't dissociate yourself from what you're doing and just relying on technology feedback. But yes, you can totally still get that feel for the pace. And then lastly, he asked if he goes with the unadjusted pace, will he end up burnt out and overtrained? And that's a great question again, too. I mean, I think that's a very serious concern. And the simple answer is yes, definitely possible. It's definitely possible to do that. So you really have two options in this situation. You either back the paces off, and I'll go back to those paces. So the paces we have in there, that's going to give you a range. And so if you take somebody, say, in Florida versus somebody here in Michigan, the effective heat and humidity is going to be totally different things. Like, it's the end of June recording this, and this is the first day it's going to be almost 90 in Michigan, and so it's a big shock. You go to somebody who's from, say, Tampa or Orlando or Miami, and they're like, we deal with this all the time. It's going to be not as big of a deal. It's still going to affect their effort, but it's not going to be the shock to the system that it is for other folks in different parts of the country and the world. So you have to keep that in mind too. So it just kind of gives you, like, I would say almost like what the worst case scenario is. And so you look at that over time, as you become more adapted to the heat and humidity, or you're just becoming better trained, those paces are just going to naturally get closer to what your unadjusted paces are. And anyway, so again, it goes back to just monitoring how you feel and monitoring those efforts and just kind of using all the variables you can to make a decision on how you approach a day. So you can either slow that pace down to something that feels like marathon effort for you. And this is, if you're an experienced marathoner, this is going to be, what marathon effort feels like. So you can use that as your guide instead of the pace, and just kind of use it. And I'd say the same thing for heart rate. You use the heart rate and the pace afterwards to kind of see where you're at, and then it can give you some feedback going in further down the road, and you can adjust based on that. So the first couple might be a little bit of trial and error, and then over time you get a little bit better at dialing it in. And so the other option would be to, one, if you're really dead set on maintaining those paces. So in his case, if he really wants to maintain the 6:52 pace, he can. I would say you kind of shift away from doing a normal say 4, 6, 8, 10 mile tempo, especially early on. And then as the temperatures cool off, you you shift back to doing those longer tempos. But for now, if he's doing like a 4, 5, or 6 mile tempo, maybe he just breaks that up. And so maybe he does 4 by a mile at marathon pace with, a couple minute rest in between, a jog recovery in between, and use that. So he's still maintaining the pace, but he's backing off, and he's basically turning it into a repeat type of workout where he's getting a little bit of break, heart rate's coming back down, blood lactate levels are coming back down, and he kind of starts fresh each one. Is it going to be the same effect? I don't think you can really put a number on that, but it allows you to really practice the pace. But then again, you're going to have to rely on some of that feedback, because that 6:52 pace is going to feel a lot more intense than what your marathon actually will feel, especially early on. And you have to realize that, in June and July, that pace is going to be a lot different, especially how it feels versus how it's going to feel in October. So that's the case. I guess you would actually have a third option, and that would be to move your workouts indoors. And I've done this with a lot of people who are in like Georgia, Florida, somewhere it's really just nasty, hot and humid in the summer. And we'll take the easy days outside because we want those adaptations. But when we're focusing on pace, a lot of times we'll bring those workouts indoors, especially early on. And then as they get more adapted and their volumes increasing and things like that, then we will we'll take those back outside. But it could be a good transition now to just do your easy runs outside, move some of your tempo runs. You don't necessarily have to do every workout, but your speed workouts you can still do outside, because again, that's going to be less affected. But then move that marathon pace indoors, where you can, you don't have to run. You're not, sprinting on the treadmill, which I know is a big factor for doing a lot of that stuff indoors. So just some things to think about. I think his question was great, and I thought a lot of people could benefit from that. So with that, hopefully that helps you guys out too, and I'll talk to you later. All right, bye-bye.